Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us. Hi, Penry.
Hi, Allison.
Fun to be up here with you today.
Yeah.
Great. So before we get started, I wanted to give everyone a little bit more context around the LinkedIn platform and some of the data. We wouldn't be at a marketing-oriented conference without starting with some audience statistics. So kind of starting at a high level, we continue to see really strong growth off of a high base of members around the world, which is obviously something that's a huge part of where our company is focused. We now have 380 million professionals connected on the platform around the world, and that's a 21% growth year over year. As part of that, we're in 200 countries, and LinkedIn is now in 24 languages. And so a lot of what Zoe and Alan were talking about in terms of connecting the global workforce and building an economic graph are totally dependent upon our ability to connect people on a global basis. A critical part of our ecosystem are students and universities and institutions. We now have 39 million students on the LinkedIn platform, and it represents the fastest growing demographic of our business, which is something that we set out to do a long time ago. The idea that you're connecting people very early in their career path and kind of taking them LinkedIn kind of as part of their journey all the way through, and we're seeing that play out, which is really exciting for us. Also, obviously, as part of the educational ecosystem on LinkedIn is our university pages experience, and Russ Glass, our head of product, will talk about it more this afternoon, but we have 25,000 active university pages as well. And finally, I'm sure many of you know, LinkedIn acquired lynda.com last quarter, bringing 6,000 courses, and I think there's 250,000 segments within those courses into our family. So it's been an exciting 2015, as always. And we're not even done with the year yet, Penry. It's pretty amazing.
Nope.
So kind of with all of these assets, you think about the different ways LinkedIn has been kind of spreading ourselves around the world. How do you think about the value the LinkedIn platform and the assets bring to businesses and institutions?
Yeah, I think, as you're just reading off some of the numbers, you sort of reminds us, the people that are working at LinkedIn, it does start foundationally at the value that we provide for the members. So the 380 million members, why are they coming? What's the value that they are seeing out of the platform? And we sort of broke it down to three very clear value propositions that we offer. One is around to connect, which Alan mentioned. Initially, this thought of building these networks, it starts with identity. And so we have this notion where you can really connect to people you work with, people you sort of have known or worked with in the past, partners that you may want to sort of work with someday, companies, et cetera, executives of companies. So the notion of connecting is really, really critical for us, and making sure that's a pretty seamless experience. So when members do sort of join, they actually can find the people they may be looking for. So that first value prop is still at the very core of that of the experience that we have. The second is around, which has grown to be much more important over time, I would say, but probably again when Alan and the team were thinking about this, it was very much top of mind, is the notion of staying informed. And so staying informed could be about the network, about my personal network related to my profession. People getting new jobs, people going back to school, news related to companies I'm interested in, news related to, again, my network. This notion of staying informed has grown into now things that I may want to learn, things that I may want to be exposed to, things that I may know that I need to understand more about in relation to my own aspirations with my career. So the notion of stay informed, I think, started with this idea of what the identity in my network was about, but it's grown now to much more about my entire sort of view of my professional life. And lastly, the third sort of value proposition, which has sort of where, again, LinkedIn recognized a lot of strength, is literally helping people get a job. And so I think that could be taken literally as getting a job. It also could be thinking about preparing ourselves to get the job I aspire to get one day. And so again, that also builds into this network and this notion of the connections that I'm making. It builds on the value proposition of staying informed to really get this outcome that I'm looking for. And so that's the baseline, I think, of why membership continues to grow at such a rapid clip, and we want to continue to stay focused on delivering on those core value propositions. When you look at on the other end, sort of really educational institutions, as we talk about today as sort of the focus, there has to be an equal value prop. Why do educational institutions want to sort of be on the platform as well? We've got to think about, and companies, so thinking more broadly as we sort of touch on this, but the idea is that For us, from a student perspective, there's a very clear life cycle of students. Why we've committed to the education vertical with Jessica and Saeed as they introduce themselves today is the idea that it's more than just generating leads. It's a long sort of life cycle of a student, and all the way from prospective students, and now, as you said, sort of even young students, college or even high school students able to join to really help them inform what kind of educational decisions they may be making and choices, all the way through to obviously alumni and making sure we can engage and stay close to the alumni. So there's real value that we're thinking about for the whole sort of student life cycle that is obvious on LinkedIn. And from a just macro perspective of how we work with companies, we think about the dimensionality of LinkedIn for the ability to help companies grow. And that's really the foundation on the business of LinkedIn, is thinking about how do we help the dimensions where we think are most important for companies to grow around talent. So that's talent acquisition, talent retention, talent development. It's the idea of marketing, and so the brand of that company. How do we help with brand awareness, brand recognition, brand favorability, thought leadership related to the brand, and then also related to selling. There's a whole sort of business that we have related to helping sort of the notion of social selling become more of the way we practice finding and working with prospects. So we have these very clear member values that I think help this dimension around growth of our own member platform. And then there's a real clear work stream or work streams that we're thinking about helping educational institutions connect to these students on their whole life cycle, as well as with companies, and how do we really help them grow.
Great. So let's spend a couple minutes on the market value proposition, given kind of our audience and spending the day with everyone here. We've made so many changes to our portfolio and kind of have shifted our strategy over the last couple of years from a more traditional display business and to one that's very, has put content at the center of our business. We now see that our sponsored updates ecosystem is nearly half of our advertising revenue on the platform and is fulfilling a huge range of what marketers are trying to accomplish. And that shift of content at LinkedIn has not only been about the marketing value proposition, but it's been about the whole member experience. Can you just talk more about our marketing solutions vision and mission and kind of what's to come?
Yeah, I think you touched on one clear sort of change, which we've sort of from the display, thinking about advertising. And I think really, the business itself, the team is called Marketing Solutions for a very important reason, which is we are a solutions provider. We should be thinking more broadly than advertising. And so a lot of the assets that we have should be deployed a little bit differently than thinking about it as being, again, things like in-mail, things again like content. You could look at it very differently. And so from a strategic perspective, a couple of years ago, when we saw the commoditization of display in the general market framework, we saw a lot of the move towards impression-based buying, data-driven, impression-based programmatic buying. Those were areas that we saw as opportunity, but we also saw as potentially missing what we thought a lot of the value that LinkedIn brought was around context and mindset. When you're on LinkedIn, you're actually there about striving, finding these new opportunities, really connecting with your identity or connecting with your networks. We want to make sure context is important. So when we have display as an entire sort of opportunity across the web, we saw content as a real clear opportunity for LinkedIn as we were moving towards a more mobile-based sort of traffic-based traffic patterns. More than 50% of our traffic is now coming via a mobile device. So the display business is not going to work. We haven't found that to work in the mobile world. So we thought about it from a clear context and mindset, which is really what the platform stands for and is, and really the format delivery of how to make sure we're able to have commercial and educational messaging be relevant. And so I would say it's really around the mobile change that's happened. It's understanding programmatic and the way to move quickly and use technology. And it's really about turning up more relevance. We want engagement to happen. And on the platform, it's about, again, mindset is really critical for that to happen.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, for us, the notion of relevance is critical. And that's a big part of the member value proposition. And we spend so much of our product and engineering resources around the algorithms of LinkedIn to deliver not only the relevance using the data we have, not only from people's profile, but also the behavioral data of what the 380 million members are doing around the world. And that's what tunes the user experience on LinkedIn. And those same algorithms are what's tuning our content experience on LinkedIn, and why I think that's been so successful. So I wouldn't dare guess how many air miles Penry flies around the world, but needless to say, in his role as our global sales leader, meets with lots of customers all the time. What are kind of the common customer challenges you see, Penry?
Yeah, well, there's a lot. I think it's exactly the same ones that we in the education space sort of find as well, which is the sort of fragmentation of audiences, the fragmentation of media itself. You know, where is my audience? Where is my prospective student? Where are they? How do they want to engage? How do they want to communicate with me? How do they want to be communicated to? So these are challenges. And then if I find them somehow, what is my best way to approach them? Through what kind of format, through what kind of sort of social interaction, or what kind of push message? How do I engage with them to sort of make sure the dialogue continues and build a relationship? I think the real thing that we've started to see is this interest in sort of really building more of a relationship. When you think about a lot of marketing tactics in sort of past web, as well as still even some current web, is around direct transactional type of messaging and measurement on those direct transactional type messages. And so I think the technology is now enabling us, and platforms like LinkedIn are enabling us as marketers to think more broadly about more of sort of longer term measurement, longer term relationship building. How do I think about white papers differently? How do I think about offers differently? How do I think about content differently? And then, of course, again, this experience on mobile or desktop. So I think the challenges are many. I actually don't envy Allison, who runs all of our marketing initiatives to build demand for our business, but also many of you in the room related to how do we actually market our value to consumers today, or again, prospective students. Again, these are challenges that are not at all solved, and I think you add in the element of measurement of this. I think you start to see questions of, do I measure sort of front-end metrics around clicks and those things? We've all been yelled at through the media that those are not worth it. Don't measure clicks. But
it's so easy.
It's so
right
easy. There.
Yeah.
It's so easy, and it's again, that's part of this transactional web that we've all built about the behaviors that we know we do too. So we measure these things. Whereas I start to see again around the world and even different markets we talk to or verticals, this notion of really going deeper and understanding the metrics around success, lifetime value. How do I make sure I'm collecting this information, getting into my CRM? How do I get it to the right sort of channels to then follow up on properly? Sequential messaging, which delivers new kind of information about the types of ways that I'm interacting with potential consumers. So I think that is a really exciting area, is just the advancements in measurement. And that is something that we're going to try to, as Russell talked about, and we as a team are still trying to work on, is how do we help make sure that we're providing as much information and data to really inform you so you can have the truest measurement of impact with our platform and frankly, other platforms.
Yeah, no, it's a great point. I think for the marketing leaders at LinkedIn, it's the same challenges as many of you face in the audience in terms of how to have that breakthrough and how to sustain it. I think given all of the change that's happened, I think one of the most significant ones is that all of our buyers are always on. And like maybe for some people, the always on is a buzzword, but like they are. Probably everyone in this room has your smartphone within like 3 inches of your pocket, and that's how people live their life. And so for us, about 2.5 years ago, all of the marketing leadership at LinkedIn made a big decision to shift a lot of our focus into always-on channels and into content marketing in particular. And we had kind of a classic mix of marketers on our team across demand generation, product marketing, marketing communications, but really hired some incredible specialists who really went deep into content marketing and really went deep into our social media assets. And that's been a huge inflection point for us. And it doesn't require an army of people, but I think that sometimes you need those specialists to get in the mindset of the buyer, create really relevant, sometimes very fun, very different points of view on your content that maybe you had before. And yes, we still have campaigns. The notion of kind of larger campaigns hasn't gone away, but I think the emphasis of you have a big campaign, no one hears from you for 2 months, you have another big campaign. I think marketers are seeing that the idea that you need to build a presence in the channels that make sense and be persistent in them to have those relationships. That's what buyers are doing. And the idea that for all of us, every decision maker we want to work with, every buyer has their own journey, right? They have their own process, and students in particular are such an intense process, right, to figure out that choice of school or how you're going to close, a skills gap in your own life. And so for everyone here, trying to understand that journey, understand your story and the channels is really paramount.
I think the way that also I'm starting to see from a trend perspective is how does marketing or marketers, how are we as companies or again institutions of learning, how are we helpful?
Right.
I think if we think of ourselves as trying to sell something or trying to acquire a student or a prospect, even if the language we use is really again much more of a sort of transactional type of an environment, it's the mindset we put ourselves in. If we think about ourselves as how do I become more useful or helpful to the right student at the right time, or how do I really assist them in their process to figure out what school, so by informing them through much more sort of rich content related to to help them through their own challenging process. That to me is a big shift. It's a mindset shift again, but it's this notion of I as a brand or I as an institution, I have to think about being useful. And that goes to this real major impact that social has had on all of us. The web has had on us, related to being always on and always able to comment or connect with something. You have to have a clear value exchange today. If I'm just putting some kind of message in front of me that's very much one-sided, I have a really easy way to avoid it. It is not what I'm interested in. Forget it. And there probably is some brand degradation to it. I'm probably less interested in what you now may do later, which even though it could be something that I could have been interested in. And so I think a real shift around being useful, being helpful, really thinking about that perspective, again, consumer or student, as somebody that you're trying to assist in their life, in their process to build their own professional brand, their student brand. That I bet if we all sort of shift our mindset there, a lot more interesting content, a lot more sort of relevance will start to be in the platform or generally out there. And I think that will be much more of a big win long term for all of our businesses.
Yeah, absolutely. One of our content marketing mantras at LinkedIn is to stop selling and start helping. And we've actually seen the content that we create that's more how-to content that kind of demystifies parts of LinkedIn that people haven't figured out yet and just makes it very simple. The notion of simplicity is obviously crucial in this. People don't need a lot more content, they need more relevant content, are really defining parts of how we see customers being successful.
Yeah, part of what, it's even as we're talking about it, I'm thinking, but it's, our past education efforts, even though education has been very relevant for LinkedIn for its entirety, our past efforts were more about this notion of transactional, how do we generate leads? We know that's the goal, by the way, so we're not walking away from that goal. But the idea is, it's how do we think about the whole student journey? We didn't have that strategic mindset. We did not think about it as sort of this longer-term belief, and how do we make the platform and the experience for the members and the way we work with all of you guys, we didn't think about it as that entire process. We thought about it as just, let's try to generate the most leads as quickly as possible. I think as you'll see today, and we'll share more, and hopefully you've already started to see this as we've met over the last year, is that we're thinking more broadly about how to be useful for the entire student journey. How do we really connect all the way through this cycle for both the institutions, again, as well as the members that are looking for that?
Yeah, and I think an important part of what we're also focused on is the alumni, right? We know alumni are a critical constituency for everyone in the room, and it's a unique opportunity for LinkedIn and the data that we have and the recency of the data to help, right? The connections to alumni are so important, and I think our vision is to help. How can you connect with alumni and engage those alumni on the platform and turn them from alumni into advocates, right? Driving better advocacy for all of our businesses is just crucial, and it takes your marketing efforts, to a completely different dimension. We relish the experiences when customers stand up and speak on our behalf. Like I'll trade my microphone any day of the week for someone who is passionate about what they're doing with us or with your school or university, right? And that testimonial from someone who's been through the journey with your institutions it's kind of more magical than probably much of the marketing we all can invest in.
Yeah, I think the one trend also is you're asking sort of when we go around the world to talk to people about trends related to marketing initiatives, One from, again, a corporate sector, which also fits really well into what you're saying around alumni, is this notion of employee advocacy. And everyone we talk to is saying, how do I actually empower my employees to become my best brand advocates? And so we've got a tool now to sort of do that, but the notion is I've got tens or hundreds or thousands of employees that probably have some amount of pride in what we're doing every day as a company. How do I actually enable them to be really authentic in their support of this? Similarly with not only employees of the educational institutions, but alumni. Similar, how do we really, really ratchet up the notion of alumni advocacy? And so this is an area, again, as Allison's mentioned, we're really thinking about a lot. We're developing some ideas here, but we know that's a really important channel that LinkedIn has the data about this. And we can really do a much better job of really helping, again, this entire life cycle for the student journey.
You know, one of the other things we spend a lot of time talking to customers about is the ability to make the changes within our own organizations to adapt, right? We all need to have a lot more agility in how we go to market and how we think about our businesses. And for many educational institutions, the stakeholder set is complex. At LinkedIn, we're heavily matrixed, so kind of half of what I need to do as a marketer sits in other people's teams. So we send lots of gift cards and thank you notes, and our designers are here, and my web guys are over there. But the idea of aligning people around the buyers and kind of putting students or the audiences you care most about at the center of your businesses can be different and kind of require some change management. We talk a little bit more about how you see companies doing this and taking their own journey to be more relevant today.
Yeah, I think really to me, a lot of this is to rely, again, as you know, marketers, generally all of us, and thinking about, again, your own institutions, a lot of this is you don't have to put it all on your own shoulders. You don't have to think that you have to do everything. You know, teams like ours, teams that you also work with across other platforms and sort of partners, you know, we've got a lot of intelligence related to the data we have, related to systems we can work, again, related to some of the technologies that we all use. So I would say part of it is leaning into your partners to really make sure that they're able to know exactly your strategies, your goals, KPIs, et cetera, and thinking again more broadly about this relationship building that you're trying to accomplish. And you know, enabling us to actually deploy a lot of these resources in the most proper way. If we're all just sitting here thinking about, you know, cost per leads as the entire story, you know, there's probably behaviors that we're going to deploy that are not actually as productive as we could do if we actually were thinking more broadly. And so I would say, again, not just for LinkedIn, for all of your partners, you know, don't take it on yourselves, as just for yourself. Lean into the partners, ask them for support, ask them for ideas of other partners they may be, that may be out there to help. Advertising agencies obviously are also sort of going through their own changes related to this. Some of you work with agencies, some of you don't work with them, but they're also, agencies are there to try to work through this. They're also reaching out to people like us to sort of build sort of multiple faceted ways to actually engage with, you know, partners to figure out the right way to provide solutions. So I think, you know, it's a massive change we're going through. The technology, the fragmentation we talked about, there's not an understanding that somebody has to do everything or know everything. I think that is the challenge, is making sure you're open to real dialogues about substantive efforts to make sure that we're all being more productive by deploying everything we possibly can to get to this, you know, these better outcomes.
Yeah, and I think from my perspective, it's also bringing people with you. I think as the marketer within your institutions, you have a big part, at least in creating the story, or at least owning the story, right? And bringing everyone along with you. We talk about looking in before you can look out. You have to kind of define, you know, why do you matter? What is your unique story in the world? And kind of bringing your stakeholders with you to get people excited to tell that story. If it's just looked at oh, that's a marketing thing, that's a marketing message, you know, you lose that collective power of everyone out talking and kind of being on the same page with the story. Arianna Huffington had this, what I think is a pretty great quote about social media as the new front page. And I think she's exactly right. And kind of for all of our audiences, younger audiences, the feeds of social platforms is where they get their news. It's where they get their information and make decisions. And so the idea that in marketing can't always, you know, you're not the only one managing the social channels. Your employees, your students, your alumni are all in those channels. And so bringing that story to life takes much more than just kind of one team bringing it forward.
Yeah. Yeah, I think to me that is this notion of it being the front page. I just think I didn't realize when sort of Facebook started, when LinkedIn started, sort of this notion of what the social world could become and how much it would affect literally everything we do. And related to communications and probably even more so, I really do understand that that's exactly right. The notion of most of everything that will be sort of affected from commerce to decision making around purchasing, all sorts of things. The influence now that our social graph has, or for us again also professional graph, is incredibly much more robust than I would have ever expected 10 years after these businesses and this whole new behavior was actually born.
Right, absolutely. Let's spend a minute talking talent, since kind of the topic of talent is near and dear to everyone in the room and has implications on our business being able to execute in this new world. You've been hiring people and bringing people into organizations for a long time, Penry. Tell me more about how you see kind of talent evolving, the types of skills you feel like are changing within businesses and sales and marketing in particular.
I don't know. I think there's, first of all, like there's this vertical thing. We've really committed to education because, again, it feels like for us, we have to be the best sort of trusted advisor we can be related to the opportunities that you guys all face. And so I really do believe there's certain verticals that we really want to make sure that we're committed to and have talented people that can really be partners versus any kind of sales, vendor sales thing. That to me is not as productive as what we can be when you're a real trusted advisor. But I do think from just a general take, it's very hard to hire somebody based on what they've done in the past today. I think most of us look at the history, somebody's resume or their CV or LinkedIn profile and sort of make determinations on what they've done. Most of the jobs that we're all creating today have actually never been done before. We actually should be looking about how do I hire somebody based on what they can do versus what they've done in the past. I think that's a huge, important mind shift we've tried to take, and it's more about a capacity and a curiosity decision versus a skills and proven type of past role to us. And so I think the notion of that is something that has served us well. We've kept, as all sorts of companies, and again, similarly with graduates of your institutions, we look for people that are really sort of going to be something special based on a bunch of characteristics that we all look at and score and try to understand through the process. But that's the foundational change I've made. It's not about what somebody's done. It really is centered on what I think and the hiring committee, what do we think they can do in the future.
I love that notion. That's great. I'd love to end on more of a personal side. It's early on a Thursday morning, but we're going to get personal. So, Penry, you've been a consumer of higher education yourself. Would love to hear kind of about I don't know your college experience. We don't need to get into it in that detail.
I'm not sharing it either.
If anyone knows Penry, you're connected to people, start digging it up. But I mean, tell us more about your kind of college experience and what has that meant for you, and kind of how is that still relevant to you today, and the meanings it has had throughout your professional career.
Yeah, I think and it's funny as you're asking it. Education for me, I don't want to say I wish I could do it again, but I wish I understood more about the power of education when I was sort of personally going through my own sort of education process. So I have a BA. I did not go to graduate school. And actually, I chose my institution where I went based on the fact that it felt like they wanted me to come, to be honest. Since we're all close friends here. It was not the way my parents were. There's a very different understanding today. I think this is about awareness. It's about information that we all have access to. And I think the way I parent, we were talking, Allison, we both have kids. My son is 16, so we're starting to go through these discussions. And I think the awareness, the information that I have, the information he has, at his fingertips, very different than the information that I had or the way my parents thought about education. So while I think I had a good education, I think it served me well, I chose, and I had I was thinking about sort of graduate school at one point and felt like, to me, I wanted to stay in the working, I was in New York, I've been in New York for a long time. I wanted to stay working. I felt like that was my sort of continuing education. And so who knows? I don't know if it was the right decision or wrong decision. I feel like I'm surrounded by really smart, amazing people that sort of help me understand the journey of what a student is. I think learning, whether it be at an institution or, or within your working environment, professional life, is still critical. I've left companies because I felt like I wasn't learning as much. I'm incredibly interested in what LinkedIn does with Linda as a skill-based sort of notion of continuing learning. I don't think it's at all what you guys offer in terms of real sort of higher institutions of learning, but I'm really interested to see the future of what education does. For my son, maybe a little sort of too close to school to sort of have major change, but I'm really interested in sort of how the entire spectrum of education evolves over these next 5, 10, 20 years.
Yeah, it's a fascinating time. For me, so much of my undergraduate education was not only the kind of the skills and the insights you gain, but it was actually the mentorship. And so at your institutions, how much you can foster the mentorship between professors and students and just that community of people, and obviously the peer aspect of it was so powerful to me. And I'm still connected to one of my professors from UCLA. He's now at USC, but I still see him at events, and we kind of connect on topics. He sees LinkedIn publishing and asks me questions, and so to have those, kind of those seeds back are great. And I pursued a business school degree because I was in the opposite direction, where I had pursued a path and loved it for a while, but felt like it wasn't the right path for me, and so I wanted to change that direction in a business school. And there's some Wharton people here. I'll have to give them a shout out to the Wharton team. Totally changed my trajectory forever, like changed the inflection point I have. And so for me, I'm so grateful for that, and I kind of reflect on it. But I agree, you can have hindsight's always, sharper vision.
You never know.
Well, we're so appreciative of everyone spending the day with us. Penny and I are going to be around all day. I look forward to having more discussions with each of you. And thank you again for your partnership and time. And we look forward to having a wonderful day with you guys here. So thank you.
Thank you.